Thanks for listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. 1 hour of tips from experts and real stories from people just like you. For those thinking about what lies ahead, for those going through the job search, and those who have paved the way to their next career after the military. These professionals are dedicated to helping you move forward successfully to the next phase of your career after the military. Welcome to Exchange.
And as we stir the soup, we find those people who are actively transitioning out of military service or paramilitary service. I'm totally open to having non-DoD armed forces, and I love our Coast Guard. I live in Hawaii. The Coast Guard is an integral part of our safety, and I have an expert in not only port safety and security, but a leader within the Coast Guard. I'd like to introduce you to Matt Dooris. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for having me.
Tell us something that's impactful for you right now as you transition out into the civilian workforce.
As far as impact's concerned, my initial strategy when I thought about retiring, and that was about 2 to 3 years ago, and I took my first TAPS class and, of course, drank from a fire hose at that point in time. And then I started to lay the groundwork for, what I would hope to be a very successful transition in 2 to 3 years. I started to really look at the nuts and bolts of the transition, which is, obviously your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your elevator pitches, basically all these more technical aspects of the transition process. And as I started to move through that process, taking mentors and coaches with various programs like American Corporate Partners or 4Block, I started to realize that there's more to the transition process than just putting together a targeted resume or researching companies. You really need to, in my opinion, look at who you actually potentially are as a person and what really motivates you. And I believe by doing that, which is incredibly challenging, and that's sort of where I am right now, then you can really, I think, truly start targeting, whether it's a company or it's another government organization or nonprofit, a job in one of those sectors, which I think if you do it correctly, it hopefully will bring you some happiness, on the other side once you're out of the military. I know, having listened to some of your podcasts, one of the things I picked up was just how many veterans transition into jobs and leave those jobs within a year. I think it was as high as 60%, perhaps higher. But I think that's likely because the internal reflection, if you will, never happened.
I'm going to pull you back to something you said. You said, and that's very challenging to learn who you are and what you want. Can you elaborate on
that? Yes, absolutely. It is a challenge. It's probably one of the hardest things I've done in my transition process. I've spoken to a number of transitioning veterans. I've performed about 50 different informational interviews, and some with transitioning veterans, some who never served. And some a recurring theme I kept hearing, at least from those on the outside, was, I ended up just jumping on a job because I was terrified of not having one. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to provide for my family. And so, some of them expressed emotions or feelings of panic. I've got to get this, I've got to land this job yesterday. And I just took whatever I could get. And, I'm trying to spin my transition in a way where I'm not viewing it with fear, and instead I'm viewing it just as this incredible opportunity to potentially redefine myself, really be myself, and pursue something new, where I can have some major impact, instead of just, I guess, succumbing to the little uh, fear figure on my shoulder whispering to me that I need to dump in 80 applications with the hopes I can land a job by the time I hit my last day on active duty.
It's a compulsion, and it gives you
Hmm.
nothing but rejection. And as you do these informational interviews, I guess, what are some of the questions that are coming up about the Coast Guard? Do they have assumptions about who you are? Or give us some feedback.
Absolutely. I think there may still be a stigma out there, anytime, especially someone who may not have served, there's a potential stigma that, especially a senior officer or a senior enlisted member coming out, we're going to jump in and be aggressive and holler at folks and expect people to bow to our will and all those sorts of things. And I can tell you that doesn't even happen inside the Coast Guard or in a lot of military branches. I think most senior leaders opt for, there's professional or positional power and you have personal power. And I think we all rather use personal power that we develop through trust and relationships with our folks. And the reality is, I don't know many senior leaders. I mean, there are always a few who don't truly care for their folks. And I think in the military, we learn that. I mean, you learn it's not just one of your enlisted members or one of your officers. It's their family too. When they're hurting, the member's hurting, and then the whole unit is potentially hurting, or the division or department. So that's a skill set and just I guess a natural leadership quality that you'll get from military leaders. And so I try to convey that whenever I'm talking to folks that, hey, no, we lead with empathy. We try to be very self-aware.
Oh.
And so, just being able to identify areas that we can, improve upon. And I think bringing that into the private sector or another government organization, I think it's welcomed. And when I talk about that with folks I'm having these informational interviews, my hope is to sort of change that stigma if it exists. There are some who don't have that, and they actually right off the bat they want to hire military. I know there's some tax incentives to doing that anyway, but I think at the end of the day they know that we may not know some of the specific tasks that they're going to delegate to us, that we may not know how to do those immediately, but they know that we generally have growth mindsets, that we are adaptable, that we can communicate both written and orally. We're going to be willing to take calculated risks and put ourselves out there, even if we're not completely comfortable, because, hey, we've got to get the job done. And I'd say one of the best qualities we have as military members is, at least in the culture of the Coast Guard, we're too small not to embody this characteristic. Is if a team member's hurt and struggling, even if it's not my job, I'm jumping in, and we're going to get it done together. And I'm going to stay as late as I need to in order to get it done. And so,
Yeah.
those are some of the things I try to convey to folks that I am talking to, I would say other questions that I get about the military is, do you interact outside the military, or is it just all internal? And with the Coast Guard, a lot of people don't realize that we're constantly interfacing with or communicating with the public, whether it's the voting public.
Right.
For instance, I have someone who works with me who's a recreational boating specialist, and their sole job is to do targeted outreach to the boating communities because we want to prevent them from doing unsafe acts so they don't end up in boating accidents.
Right.
We do aids to navigation, which is those green and red buoys that are out there. And so we're communicating with professional mariners and the recreational community. We have
Hmm.
emergency responses. Oftentimes you'll see coasties, especially senior leaders. If it's a large incident like the Gulf oil spill or Hurricane Katrina, they're in the middle of press conferences and working with our agency partners. So there's a lot of interaction with the public. And in fact, in my position, in port safety security, I'm always communicating with executive leaders from Canadian shipping companies, foreign shipping companies. And last night I was talking to the board of directors for some U.S. shipping companies as well. Um, so just because we're military members doesn't mean that we're not interacting frequently with the private sector, and also that we don't have some at least fundamental understanding of key business principles.
You mentioned that you're looking to do something that is really unique and that you haven't quite figured out what that is. I don't want to hold your feet to the fire, but I'd really like to hear a little bit more about that and that process. Not necessarily what it is you think you're going to do, but what's that like? I mean, do you wake up in the morning and write down 5 new ideas? What do you do?
All of this sort of started when I was participating in the 4 Block program, which, by the way, is just an incredible. It's a free program for transitioning veterans and their spouses, and that's what I love. Is a lot of these programs are
Yes.
will also incorporate spouses, and so I love that. And you are assigned a coach in 4 Block, and my coach, he was sort of a outside the box thinker, and he pushed me. I mean, he really pushed me beyond the limits of just making sure I had a good resume or that I had thought about my elevator pitch and those types of things. But he really wanted to get into more of the mental piece, and what was really motivating me to pursue some of the career opportunities I was looking at, and I couldn't answer him. And then he said, "You may want to take this time since you are a planner and you are ahead of the game. Um, why don't you take the opportunity to examine this?" And so he didn't specifically lay out any tools. He did introduce me to some folks who I spoke with, and they provided me with a couple of references that I've been able to leverage. One was the book U Turn by Ashley Stahl. It's all about pivoting in careers, whether you're military, civilian, it doesn't matter. Then there's this website that I wasn't aware of called standbesideThem.org. Yes, it's free coaching. You get 10 sessions, I believe, over a 5-month period. And there must be about 150 different coaches, and their resumes are listed there. And you just fill out an application, and I guess you can request somebody. I didn't, but they do executive leadership coaching, they do career development
Mhm.
coaching, and then life and relationship coaching.
Wow.
And it's available to spouses and transitioning military members. So I thought it was a great resource. And about maybe 5 to 6 days after I did the application for executive leadership and career development coaching, I had somebody reach out, very seasoned coach. The coaching sessions, I've done one thus far.
Mm.
And just from that one session alone, I've picked up just a lot of information, a lot of little tools that I can use to try to, essentially a process or framework that I can utilize to try to figure out where I'm going.
I just went to a conference and we all wore tags like ambivert, extrovert, introvert. And I think it gives people an opportunity to know who they're talking to. We don't wear those in corporate America. And I think they did it more as a game. But
Mhm.
understanding who you are and you're going through that process, can you share what's going on with you about that labeling?
So I would say that I'm an introvert. Um, I want to label myself there. Susan Cain, the book Quiet, it talks about how um, organizations tend to value extroverts or extrovert qualities, not so much introverts, but the real production and the real ingenuity and innovation generally comes from introverted behavior, introverts. If you recall, and I'm an industrial hygienist, so I'm always interested in ergonomics and what, employee well-being, things of that nature. And they tried to come out with workplaces where you had the cubes and people would sit next to each other, and there was no walls or no isolation. It was, you're just sitting out there, and they've come to find out that that actually doesn't work very well. At least for introverts, we've got to have our space to think and work and produce. And so, I think there's some value in knowing, whether you're an introvert or extrovert. But, I think there's introverts who express extrovert qualities and extroverts who express introvert qualities, and there's folks in between. And there's probably environmental situations where, you're a little of both. But, throughout my career, I've learned to improve on those extrovert qualities. I've learned to try to put myself into uncomfortable situations, because that feeling in your gut that, when you have that, you're in a situation that's uncomfortable, but that
Hmm.
means you're likely growing. And that, I know that's not an original idea. What was funny was that book that I was telling you about, U Turn, written by Ashley Stahl. She actually talks about that fear you feel is not actually fear at all. It's your body just super excited about getting to do something new. And so it's a different spin, a more positive spin on leveraging that feeling in the pit of your belly, or that fear that you think you're feeling, more in a positive light, so that you can ignore it. And it's, in a little bit is fine. It's when it gets overboard where it becomes an issue, and you have to work on that. But
Hmm.
I think the more you do things, the more you put yourself out there, the better you get at being able to adapt and overcome, if you will.
You're on a journey of figuring out what you want to do. Does any of it include a hobby or a small business or something bizarre, like completely aside from industrial hygiene or port safety and security? I mean, what are you going to do? Underwater basket weaving? Tell it.
I'm certified in four different subject areas, but I feel like they're all very much aligned, whether it be public health, security, industrial hygiene, or safety. And but again, they sound so diverse, but they are so similar. There's a great book by E.O. Wilson called Consilience. And he's a entomologist with Harvard, studies ants
Hmm.
and bees. What he talks about is how everything is unified.
Hmm.
It's great to look at various knowledge bodies holistically. And that's sort of how I approach issues from an interdisciplinary standpoint, because I think that you can pull information from different subject areas to solve, especially really complex issues, in an innovative way. Um, and so that's a great thing, but it can also be sort of an obstacle when you're transitioning from the military, because I'm trying to figure out, I have an interest in so many things. I'm trying to figure out, with all these various interests, which one really fits my ethos, if you will, the best. And some of the things that I've learned is, I definitely want to find a job that allows me to sort of mirror the the ethos I experienced within the Coast Guard. I love serving. I love serving other folks. I had one guy I actually spoke to 3 days ago, and he said that was one of the hardest things he had, that he faced, was he got out of the military, and he thought he was motivated by money. He was chasing the money, um, and it led to three or four different unhappy jobs. And now he's working for an organization that, where that's not the primary motivating factor. It's servicing others.
Right.
One of the things that my wife and I really like to do is help children. We just don't know how. My wife's an
Right.
artist, a self-employed artist, and she's really looking at putting on workshops and things like that. So we've talked about a potential nonprofit, which is completely different. Talk about a
Yeah.
career pivot. Um, and obviously there's risk there, but it's something that just warms our heart. And whether we do it, whether it becomes something I do immediately or something I do, several years down the road, or I do, sort of in parallel with whatever job I'm doing next. I think at some point in time we'll probably end up pursuing.
Can someone get a hold of you and talk to you if they have an interest? If what are your parameters? Can they reach you through LinkedIn or?
No, it's just my name, Matt Dooris.
And that's Dooris. Dude, you're awesome. And I want to say thank you so much. I know that you're going to be sharing resources, learning new things, and moving through it. And hopefully we'll have a chance to check back with you as you get into your first year to see how things are going.
All right. Well, thank you, Cheryl. I really appreciate it.
So that's our soup segment. We were just listening to Matt Dooris, who's actively transitioning from the U.S. Coast Guard. My name is Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. We'll be up next with an expert after this very short break. We're here with our episode expert, and I am so honored to bring somebody who is part of the military community by being an affiliate through being a military brat and now military spouse. She teaches veterans how to connect through breath work, through body movement, through yoga. Please welcome Jen DeForest. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Cheryl. Thanks for having me. Round of applause.
You're here in Hawaii, and for those of you listening, we were trying to figure out how we bring the most value to you if you're outside of Hawaii. Because if you're here, you can go to any of the places that Jen is teaching, Camp Smith, Makalapa, or Tripler, and experience her in person. So we were kind of, mind melding on how we can bring you the most value in this upcoming segment. So we've got some really great treats. But let's learn about you, Jen, and what brought you to this. As a military spouse, I know just through affiliation and learning from you all that you all are very active in supporting your spouses and those other service members. Is that how you started on this journey, or was there another way?
So I think like most people who step into a space of yoga, most have a personal practice. Most stepped in as a student. Probably the blanket answer that you'll get is, I went to take care of myself. I went to just kind of reduce stress and just to calm down and just, find my way. I was going through a tough time in my life, and that was true for me. I was going through a very stressful time. I stepped into yoga, and I was fortunate enough to have a teacher who was unlike any other yoga teacher I'd ever experienced. She didn't fit the mold of what we might think of when we think of yoga teacher. She was very boisterous, very outspoken, and very invitational. She was like, try this, do this, yes. And, it made me more comfortable in the space. It made me feel like I could really let go of trying to force my body into a certain shape and instead just play with it and be okay with wherever I was in that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a kind of yoga I didn't know existed. And it turns out that is actually yoga. That's the heart of yoga, is just being okay with where you are, finding comfort and peace with where you are instead of forcing yourself into something that you think you should be. So letting go of expectation of outcome, which in this population, with service members is,
wow. Yeah.
That's it. If you don't have expectation of outcome, like what is there? So letting go of that was hard for me. And so when I met my husband and, he had a yoga practice, and I started to see, as he began his transition, how yoga and mindfulness was helping him process all of the stuff that comes along with that transition, the stuff that they don't prepare you for. Because for the first time in your life, especially if you've been in for your entire adult life, you've really never had permission to go at your own pace. You've always been given a mission. It's always been mission first. We're going to complete that mission, and then we're going to go on to the next mission. And there's just been no time to process anything that you've experienced. And then when you're out, suddenly you have all the time in the world to process that. So long answer to your question. I started for myself, and then I just saw it started to click how this could benefit people like my husband and people who don't think that yoga is for them. Just kind of teaching people that, or just holding space, just showing people that yoga is for everybody. And it's on there. If you go to like my LinkedIn page, or and if you see me on social media, I say yoga is for everybody, every single body. Everybody can do yoga. I've had people practice in their heads because they're unable to practice in their body for whatever reason. And there are clinical there are studies done that even people who practice yoga in their head, they go along and they imagine themselves doing it because maybe they're, confined to a wheelchair, or for whatever reason, they're not mobile. They're still activating their parasympathetic nervous system. They're still bringing their bodies out of fight or flight, even though they're not physically moving their bodies. They're still being present. So all of this is just phenomenal to me. And I just keep grabbing information when I can get it and keep learning, and I want to share it. I want to give all these service members and these veterans just a big hug, and I just want to be like, yoga is for you. You're going to love it, and you need it.
You said something about work out, not work in, or no, not work out, work in.
Work in, yes.
Not your saying,
yeah.
But what does that
Not
mean?
Not mine. So a big part of a service member's, job is staying physically fit. You have to be physically, you're physically ready. So working out, taking regular tests to make sure that you are still physically fit. It's super important. And there are a ton of benefits from that. But what happens when we go, we work out, and we don't take the time to slow down, we miss all the stuff that we're just kind of burying. Whether it's a physical symptom, maybe there's something going on with your left knee and you don't notice it until it's too late, until you're doing some CrossFit one day, or you're doing PT and something big happens to your knee and now you need surgery. We take things like yoga as a work-in. So you're slowing down, you're paying attention to what's going on in your body. The best way I've had somebody describe it is when they come to my yoga class, they said it's like their internal accountability. They're such a busy person and every other part of their life is go, that when they step into yoga, they get to do, it's like an appointment. They get to put themselves in, their version of these poses. They move slowly, they move with their breath, and they bring their full attention to their body. And when they do that, they go, hey, my left knee is talking to me, or, oh, that's new, or, oh, that feels better, or, oh, I didn't know I could do that, or, oh, wow, I have way more stability on this side than this side of my body. Things like that, and they can make note of them. And that's the whole point, is just noticing. So you're making an appointment with yourself. So I call it a work-in, and it's just going to make your workouts better. It's going to make everything else you do better. So when I tell them that, I'm like, hey, do you want better workouts? Do you want better performance, better sleep, better stress management, all of these things? It's just going to make your next workout that much better. Yeah.
What are some of the issues you see with service members or veterans who are attending your classes? And I don't mean issues like this is wrong, but maybe something that would not happen in the civilian world in a yoga class. What do you see?
So one of my favorite things is that they come into my class, especially if they're new to yoga, very resistant, very uncertain, and they want to always know the plan, right? We have to have our plan. Is it plan of action? We have to know, and I do that. I give them that comfort at the beginning of class. I'm aware. So my specialty, I've taken extra training so that I can hold space for service members. So the style that I teach, I start with a plan of action. I start with, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with breath work. We're going to move into we're going to start with seated postures. We're going to move to standing, and we're going to end here. And I let them know ahead of time that that's what's coming. That being said, it is so important to them that when they're in whatever pose I'm cueing, they need to know they're doing it right. They look to me. My favorite example is I had a service member, and I gave a very, what I consider to be a very simple cue of, relax the shoulders and the neck, let the chin drop to the chest, take a stretch through the back of the neck. And I'm looking at him, and he's doing it, but he's also looking up at me with he's got like cranking his neck, and he's like, am I doing it right? Am I dropping my chin to my chest correctly? And I'm like, listen, do you feel sensation? Does it feel good? Do you feel tension? You're okay. As long as you're not in pain, you're doing it right.
Wow.
So it's a very unique population, and they want to make sure they're getting it right. So teaching them, I don't want to say teaching, just holding space so that they can find it out for themselves requires a little extra patience, because they want so badly to know how to do it and do it right.
So your style is based on your love of your boisterous, really authentic teacher who was not what you thought you thought the normal yoga teacher would be. And you're saying it's invitational. I've never heard this. Can you explore more about invitational yoga and your style?
Yeah. So invitational yoga is just that. Every single thing that I offer, and this is through my training with military specific nonprofits who give yoga teachers these tools to teach in this setting, because it is such a unique population. So when we say invitational, that means that whatever I'm cueing, if it doesn't feel right in your body, if you would like to do something completely different, please do that. You don't need my permission to come out of a pose. You don't need to wait for my cue. I've had people, as soon as I start class, especially if we start lying down, I've had them fall asleep. They've just taken a nap. They've taken a 45-minute nap. And so that's what their body needed. Maybe in a traditional yoga class, if you go to a studio, looking for a workout, there's an expectation to do the postures a certain way, and the teachers will, come over and they will physically move your body. That's another thing that we don't do in this style. It's trauma sensitive yoga. I don't do hands-on. In fact, I rarely leave the mat. And I think this is extra important with this population, because for many of them to fully relax and feel safe, they need to know where I am. So if their eyes are closed or if they're lying down, if I'm moving around the room, they're just going to start tracking.
Yep.
They've come out of their body. It's not going to happen. So I sit on my mat. It is I think the only time I leave my mat is if I notice someone could benefit from a prop, like a block or something, and I'll walk over to them and I'll do that. Or if someone has taken a nap and they start to snore super loud, and I tell them this before class, if you're snoring and it's becoming disruptive, and I kind of look at the other class, and as long as they're okay, I kind of let it be. But if it seems like it's disturbing them, I said, I'll come over, you'll feel me tap your left shoulder. And then I'll be on my way. That's it. That's all we're going to get. So this is why it's so special to me, because once I've started teaching in this way, I've had people who you wouldn't expect to, if you looked at them, you wouldn't think that's somebody who has a regular yoga practice. And I love that. One of my favorite students is a retired Navy SEAL. He's in his 60s. We're talking old school, like OG Navy SEALs. And my first class, he didn't even participate. he said, "Can I just check it out? Can I just see what it's about?" And so I said, "You can sit." I said, "You can sit and you can observe. Absolutely. I'm just going to hold space for you." And he did. And then, he was just, I don't know about yoga. And he came back. And this was almost a year ago. And he has been to every single one of my classes, unless he's on a work trip or unless I don't have class for whatever reason. He's my regular. And now I will see him come in. He has a meditation pillow. He'll haul in his stuff, his meditation pillow, and he'll come into the room before I even start class. And when I go in there to set up, he's sitting, and this is at a gym. This is at a marine gym, so it's not quiet. He has a mat, he's on his meditation pillow, and he's meditating, and he is checked out.
Wow.
He's got a smile on his face. He's unbothered. There's somebody on a rowing machine behind him. There's somebody over here, grunting on the TRX machine, and he's just totally present. And a year ago, he's not the guy. If you met him, you wouldn't know. And I love that. And so that's where I am. That's who I want. Yoga is for you and you and you and you and you.
You learned a lot of these things through veteran service organizations, some
Mhm.
nonprofits. Would you share those resources? I know a lot of my listeners, not my listeners, our listeners. It's your segment
Oh,
too. I know
oh,
a lot of our listeners are looking for resources in order to expand how they help the veteran and service member communities and
yes.
military spouses. So, what road
Yeah.
would you put them on? What would you recommend?
All right. So I did it this morning just as a check. If you Google or search engine Google um, yoga for military, you're going to get tons of stuff because it's starting to kind of take off here. And we have some really, really established ones. Veterans Yoga Project is a big one. These are all nonprofits. Veterans Yoga Project. Another one is Exalted Warrior Foundation, and there's Yoga for Vets. You'll see bigger nonprofits and then smaller people, and then just people like me who are out there doing it. My certification, so I got my standard yoga instructor certification at William and Mary in Virginia. And then I wanted to serve the military population, so I took additional training through Warriors at Ease. So they have a level 1. I took that virtually, and then level 2 training, which I'm hoping to actually get to go in person in Arizona this summer. It's a weekend of just intensive hands-on labs, spending time with, service members of all, body types, abilities, learning to teach adaptive yoga for those with physical limitations. So I'm super excited about that. But these are all resources. And another place that I teach through virtually, there's an organization, also a nonprofit, called Team RWB. So as in red, white, and blue. And this is a big community of veterans, but I'm not a veteran. But they serve family members, civilians, anybody who wants to support our military population, can join. It's free, and they have all of these in-person groups. There's a group on Oahu. There's groups all over the country, even in other places in the world. If there's a military installation, there's probably some sort of Team RWB affiliation. They keep that connection going, and then there are virtual options. So that's what I offer on their app. So I teach 2 classes on there as well, so they can find me there. But that being said, just even the VA, wherever you are as you're transitioning. I have a friend here who works at the VA, and she's a yoga instructor, and she's working in her position at the VA here at Tripler to bring this to the front as a stress management, a tool that they can keep with them. That's not a doctor's visit or, a medication, just something that they can kind of call their own and use as a tool. Just give them. I just want to give them stuff.
I think you're doing a great job. And before we hit record, Jen had offered you, the listener, a guided meditation or just a little taste of what she offers. So I'm game.
I've got
I'm
you.
going to hold space for you since you are the
Yay!
professional holder spacer. I'm going to
Ooh,
hold space for you to
I like
give
that.
this to the listeners. And for those of you who are jogging, driving, maybe we have you pull over or stop jogging just for a minute. So Jen, I'm going to just give the floor to you and witness you and let the recording go so you can do your thing. Go for it.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, guys. All right. So I'll do like we'll do maybe just a 5-minute meditation, a little breath work here. So wherever you are, we're going to go ahead and find any comfortable seat. So wherever you are, maybe you're on your couch, maybe you're at work. If you have headphones or earbuds, highly recommended, but if not, we're just going to go for it. So find any comfortable seat, okay? And if you feel comfortable, just let your hands rest gently in your lap. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and allow the eyes to close. Again, only if it feels good for you, if it's comfortable. And just begin by taking a few deep breaths here. Maybe inhaling through the nose, if comfortable. And then slowly releasing the exhale. Allowing the muscles in the face to soften. Unclenching the jaw. And just bringing your awareness to your breath without judging it, without trying to change it, just noticing your breath. And bringing your awareness to any part of the body that has contact with the floor or your seat. And continue breathing deeply here, full awareness on the breath. And on your next inhale, bring your awareness to the top of your head. Feeling any tension or stress melt away with the exhale. And continuing this breath, releasing any tightness or discomfort. And then bringing your attention to your forehead. Softening the space between the eyebrows and the muscles around the face. And taking another deep breath in, and on the exhale, release the jaw. Allow the jaw to unclench, maybe parting your teeth slightly. And then allowing the muscles in the neck and the shoulders to soften. First noticing any tension, any sensation, and then releasing with the exhale, allowing it to soften. And as you continue to breathe, option here to bring one hand to your sternum, maybe one hand to the low ribs, to the belly, as you begin to feel the breath, the inhale, expand here. Expand the belly, the ribs, the chest, feeling that expansion underneath the palm of your hand. And then on the exhale, feeling everything settle and contract. The chest, the ribs, the belly. And just allowing all of the muscles here in the front body to soften. And then you're welcome to leave your hands here for extra awareness, pressing the hand into the sternum. And bringing your attention to your arms and your hands. Just noticing and softening. If you'd like to release them down into your lap, you can do that. And then just continuing down into the hips, allowing the legs to soften, and then coming down all the way into the feet. Bringing your awareness to your feet and your toes. And giving yourself another full inhale here, this time shrugging the shoulders up to the ears. And then on the exhale, release the shoulders. Take another big inhale, expanding, taking up space, and exhale, let everything soften. And then from here, bringing your awareness back to the space, wiggling the fingers and the toes, maybe slowly nodding the head yes or shaking the head no. Any movement in the neck here that feels good, rotating the wrists and the ankles. Just noticing how you feel, notice where you're feeling it. And then bringing the palms to your lap, palms down, palms facing down here. We'll sit up nice and tall, create lots of length in the spine here. And we'll close out with, I like to do these 3 big sighs. We're really gonna let it go here. This is your space. I tell my students, make some noise. Whatever it is that you're bringing with you that doesn't serve you, we're gonna let it go. So we're gonna do 3 of these here together. It's gonna be a big inhale. You're gonna expand belly, ribs, chest, taking in as much air as you can, maybe even shrugging the shoulders up with you, creating that tension. And on the exhale, you're gonna open mouth and you're gonna sigh it out. You're gonna let the shoulders drop. We're gonna go for it, right? We're gonna do 3 of those, right? So wiggle around, any movement, get settled in. Bring the hands to rest in the lap, and here we go. Big inhale through the nose, expanding belly, ribs, chest. Shrug the shoulders up to the ears. 1 more sip of air, really go. Open mouth, exhale, sigh it out. Drop the shoulders, guys. Let it go. Big inhale. Do it again. Taking in as much air as you can. Taking up space here. Exhale. Let it go. 1 more. Big breath in. Biggest one yet. Open mouth, exhale. Sigh it out. Awesome. Allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm. Bring the palms together in front of the heart just for a moment. Rest the thumbs against the sternum and take a moment here to bow the head, to take a stretch through the back of the neck, to soften and take a moment for yourself of gratitude, thanking yourself for paying attention to you, for showing up, and gratitude from me to you for allowing me to hold space, for me and Cheryl to hold space for you. So aloha and thank you.
Mahalo nui loa. That's a big, wonderful saying here in Hawaii for thank you so much from my heart. You have been wonderful, and I know that you've already impacted folks who took the time, the few minutes to go through your breathing exercise, and I know you're going to continue to be an influencer in this space. How might someone get a hold of you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm active on there. I post my schedule. I post links to my virtual classes and my schedule for my in-person classes. I also share information from other nonprofits that I find and any resources, and I try to interact, and I love feedback. So the LinkedIn is a great start. Yep.
Thank you so much for being on our expert segment. That was Jen DeForest. That's DeForest. You can find her on LinkedIn. My name is Cheryl Cross. This is the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour, and we will be right back after a brief break. Back. We're heading into that segment of the show where I focus on someone who's been out between 1 and 4 years. And I picked this guy not only because he has a really cool job right now that he created, but he has such an interesting background to come from where he was to what he's doing. And I'm going to let him tell you the story. So I'd like to introduce you to my friend and Marine, Jesse Seif. Hi, Jesse. Thanks so much for joining us.
Cheryl, thank you for this invitation. I'm really delighted to speak with you on this. I know from our initial talks, we do have a lot of common ground as far as our opinions on the transition process. So I'm always happy to share my story, as wild and windy as it may be. So thank you for having me on.
Being a recruiter, and we talked about this, if I'm sitting at a bar or at an event, I always ask people, what do you do? And if it's a weird job, I always think, where did they come from to do that? And when they have a completely unrelated background, that to me is like, oh, I want to know that person. So Jesse falls into this bank for sure. Marine to percussionist, musician in the Marine Corps band. I'm sure that's called something else. He is now an entrepreneur with Seif Studios and working in my field. He's working with companies on workforce development, visual solutions. And thank you, by the way, for your continued support to the mission as a military spouse. So tell us, how on earth did you figure out this path, or did this path happen? Tell us your story.
Yes. So it's interesting to make that pivot from being a musician and then all of a sudden being an entrepreneur focused on media and video in particular. My first career path was in civil engineering, and I went to a community college because I was following the very common doctrine that if you want a high-paying job, you should go into one of the STEM fields and find a secure track. And I didn't come from a family that had a lot of money, so I had to find the most affordable route to do that. So I got the first degree program, was an associate's degree in civil engineering. Meanwhile, I had been also performing as a musician in collegiate marching band. So the University of Pittsburgh Marching Band allows surrounding students to participate in that program and take band as a class. And as I started going down that rabbit hole, I was confronted with a very harsh but sweet reality that I enjoyed music a lot more than sitting at a computer and designing bridges and roads. Not that it wasn't fulfilling, but at the time, as an 18, 19-year-old, it wasn't a hard choice to say, okay, I'd rather be drumming and traveling the country and performing with my best friends and having a great time and getting better at this craft. And that was the magnet that pulled my career trajectory towards the military. And for people listening that don't know, the United States government and the military is the number one employer of musicians in all of the world. So because the military ceremonies in each branch, they take them so sincerely, and it's a tradition that's been kept for hundreds of years in the military, echoing through the generations. So basically how the military works, they wouldn't keep you around if it wasn't important. And a lot of bands and a lot of musical units have disappeared, but the ones that they have kept around, they've kept around for a very good reason. I've made a lot of pivots, and I've basically made a career out of improvising. So from there, once you get out of music school, you're left with another challenge. How am I going to get a job? And it's something that's relevant, and it pays the bills, it's fulfilling, and it's something that I can see myself doing continuously. And long story short, that's how I discovered that there was an opening in the Commandant Zone, United States Marine Drum and Bugle Corps, for a snare drummer, which was my primary instrument. So I wrote my own audition piece, drove down to DC, and took the audition and won it there on the spot. And the next year I was shipped to Parris Island for boot camp. I'll say, first of all, that we go through the same training as all other Marines do. We go to boot camp for 13 weeks, and then you go to combat training. And the only difference there is after combat training, you usually go to your MOS school to learn the trade that you enlisted for. And in the case of a military musician, you have to pass an audition in order to get the job. So it's a civilian acquired skill. Therefore, you don't need to go to an MOS school after combat training. So you ship directly to your duty station after combat training because you've already put in the years and the decades of work to be an elite musician, to perform with the people that are in the premier bands. So you do skip some schooling, but long story short, got out of boot camp, got out of combat training, reported directly to Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C. at 8th and I, and reported for the Commandant Zone as a musician. And there is a distinct difference between the different units that are stationed there. You mentioned earlier, Cheryl, the Marine Band. Mm-hmm. So there's two organizations. The Marine Band is the original one, and they were formed by an act of Congress, and they are the original Marine Band, and that's the president's own. Their primary and sole purpose is to support music for the president and for other military ceremonies like Arlington, for inaugurations, ambassador arrivals. They have the Friday night parades. They do educational outreach. They do all kinds of performances and tours. And to augment that mission, they, in 1934, established the Commandant Zone to support the Commandant, the Marine Barracks, and to continue doing that public outreach and ceremonial support for Washington, D.C. and abroad. And I will say that's my wife is in the President's Zone. So she is a French horn player in that band, and I was a percussionist in the Commandant Zone.
Got it.
And from there, we are touring. We're traveling the world. We've gone to Switzerland. The unit has gone to France. We've gone to the West Coast to perform in California and San Diego and the recruit depot there, and Texas, you name it. We've circled the globe to perform and represent the Marine Corps to the world, and that's the primary mission there.
I did not know. I maybe have met 4 or 5 people who have served in bands or as musicians in the military. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And we do have a lot of people who are listening who maybe, even though they may have served in the military, they really don't know how that's constructed. And please tell your wife that the French horn is my favorite instrument.
I will tell her.
Yes. Tell me what led you from military to where you are now. You've only been out, you're going on 4 years, so 3 years as of this recording. You've taken a drastic move. You're not a professional musician, which I would assume you're going to be like this guy who goes off and he's this world-class drummer and he's got this really cool background. Being a former music industry person, I would think that would be super cool. But now you're in this very technical, incredibly hard to learn, visual element. You're visual communications expert now, right?
That's correct. Visual communications. That skill set started to develop right as I was getting into the Marine Corps, because as a part of the audition process, like I mentioned briefly, I composed my own snare solo, which was an option for the audition. And I decided to record it. And in that process, I was working with one of my friends at IUP in college who was a videographer, and I started getting into editing. And I realized that a lot of the concepts and musical themes and musical training that I had learned over the decade that I've been a musician, putting it simply, if you're thinking of how music flows and it has an introduction, it has a development, it has a statement and a body, and then it has a recapitulation and a conclusion. That's a storyline. That's a narrative. There are all kinds of parallels between what we see and what we hear. And a good story has peaks and valleys, and it has different contrasts, and it holds people's attention. So the same musical concepts that I learned, I basically applied to video editing. So I started to learn a core competency in editing and really understood the precise nature that goes into making a good video and how that kind of echoes the musical concepts that I mentioned. And now thinking back, it's like, okay, now all of that civil engineering training with the precision editing software,
Yep.
Maybe it wasn't a whole wasted time after all. So that also started to develop further as a B-billet in the Marine Corps. So my primary job was a musician, but it was no secret that I had this ability to edit videos. And I was soon brought into the public affairs office to start doing the social media campaigns and the video productions for the unit. And I was thriving in that role because I already had this understanding of how to communicate music visually, and being in a musical unit that also had a responsibility of sharing what they were doing on social media into the public eye, which is a part of the mission, right? The entire unit is public affairs, if you think about it. And after a while, I became the go-to guy for all things video, media, social promotions. They had me doing stuff on the battalion level, working with the silent drill platoons, and a lot of like high visibility campaigns. And, over the course of the 3 years that I had that billet, I ended up like tripling their social media following and reaching over 5 million impressions just with the videos that I created alone. I gave them assets that continue to produce dividends even after I'm gone, which is like such a gratifying thing for me.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to shift. It's like, okay, well, if I can do this job for the Marine Corps on top of my other job as a musician, maybe I would probably fare decently on my own as an entrepreneur doing this in the corporate space. So that's when I flipped the switch to say, okay, well, if I'm really honest about how much time I'm spending editing videos and doing media production for the Marines, I started to build a portfolio as I was transitioning out to put some feelers out there to see, if kind of testing the market in a way, to see if this is a viable option for me as I was transitioning out. So that's when I decided, all right, I'm going all in. I'm starting my own business. I'm calling it Steve Studios. And, the rest is history. I've been doing this for 3 years now.
You are like the poster boy of what you should do. My book, which is a 3-year guide for military professionals planning civilian careers, talks a little bit about this as you stage out. But it sounds like you did this and it feels like it was so easy. Of course, we talk about the things we've done, like it was no sweat. No problem. Because we've done it, right? We've forgotten. The whole reason this podcast is here is because I think a lot of people forget the suck of each stage, which is why I break it down into the soup. You guys, the 1 to 4 years, the people who've been out 5 years, you're at different levels of the suck because of the time spans, but it feels like it was easy. Was it easy, or are you glossing over the hard parts is what I'm asking?
100%, Cheryl. Yes. I did not mention the suck at all. It's a necessary pill to swallow. And yeah, I don't want to communicate for a second that it was easy. It was excruciatingly difficult at times because it was the unknown. The unknown is always uncomfortable, regardless of all the resources that you have.
Yeah.
And it's a risk. Like you're taking a risk, and that's not just because it's business and entrepreneurship. You are changing a lifestyle, And that goes with changing your home. I was fortunate to have, I want to say it was fortunate because I was transitioning out during COVID, and it was difficult in some ways. It made it hard, to do everyday things just like everyone else. Everyone has different challenges for different reasons during that time. But in 2020, that actually, as in a performing unit, we were not doing the shows and we weren't doing the volume of performances that we would have otherwise been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some extra time just to let my brain relax and think and plan and start getting a head start on what I wanted to do. So that was a huge blessing, was to just have that time kind of built in to start planning and start reframing my mindset to not be just military everything, but what is life like this afterwards? And definitely tough. I felt the worst imposter syndrome, Cheryl, that you could probably ever feel. It's just gut-wrenching fear. And there are prices to pay for that too. It's like you feel that you need to self-soothe in a certain way where it's like it's unbearable, and that's a great time to reach out for help if you're feeling that way, and
Yes.
Have mentors and other people that you can rely on. So definitely don't want to brush over the suck at all.
You moved from military to post-military to military spouse, so you're still service connected. I love that your wife is also sort of the same MOS. She understood what you went through to support you, and now you understand what she's doing. I would imagine she tours. She's probably deployed. Is that what you consider a deployment? To go and...
It is. So
Okay.
they do tours on a yearly basis. Sometimes they go on short tours, but usually every October the Marine Band is in a different part of the country. So we're at a permanent duty station. So we had that to our advantage. So I knew that I didn't have to move very far whenever I got out. And of course we still have to balance things, but it made more sense for me to be the flexible one and continue supporting her career path as a military musician. And we're incredibly lucky to have that common ground.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a huge factor. Could not have done it without her help. That's for sure.
Well, it sounds like you're a team. So
Yes.
That's awesome. Talk to me a little bit about, I want to go back to the suck because you have such a great story. I tried to get a Michael Klemmer. He's a former logistics supply company guy and, logistics. And he said something to me, and I use this a lot. He said, flash to bang, Cheryl, I had this company figured out in 15 days. And that sounds easy, right? Having an idea. I'm full of ideas. You want to call me up? We can have an hour. I can brainstorm with you. We can come up with a million ideas. People say, hey, don't let your ideas out. Somebody will steal it. I'm like, take it. I'll create 6 more. Ideas are easy, but doing those ideas, putting them into work. Talk to us about some of the things that you thought you would have done, but couldn't. Those walls that you hit, not just imposter syndrome, but what was the hardest part? Dig deep.
Yes. So I appreciate that question. And getting through that transition and the imposter syndrome that goes with it was this need to feel qualified and start investing in education again. Mm-hmm. And I started taking course after course. I think I took about 9 courses that year after I transitioned, and they were all related and relevant to what I was trying to build as an entrepreneur with my business. All video, all marketing, all strategy, consulting. There was like web development. There was all the photography and mastery courses that you can think of. And if I stepped back and I was looking at myself again, I could see that I was distracting myself and I was making myself feel better about not feeling qualified. And I'm not saying I regret any of that training, but I didn't give myself enough space to really think through what my plan was. And I was such a, I have to do this by myself, a little bit arrogant, I'll say, that I wasn't open to a feedback and help early enough to avoid some of that initial pain of making mistakes. And I thought that was what it was, because I've heard so many entrepreneurs talking about how difficult it is and how much struggle there is. And whenever I started to feel the symptoms of that, I didn't think much of it because I thought that's what this comes with. I should be suffering. I'm not doing it right if I'm not suffering. And, on top of all of that, figuring out how I'm going to make money, how I'm going to support my wife, how I'm going to, help contribute to bills and, get back on a track where I feel good about what I'm doing. I lost a little bit of self-care. Basically, I lost a little bit of perspective on the foundation, which is, okay, at a base biology level, and this is advice that I give people all the time, if you're unsure of where you're going, you need to start with your body. Like, you need to make sure that your basics are covered. If you're doing all-nighters, you're abusing substances, you're not exercising, you're causing additional stressors that makes it hard for your brain to take care of you. And as we transition out, we don't have the luxury of an SOP for our chosen career path, right? There's no ops or admin. There's no plan of the day that you get. You have to decide everything. And you are now the ops. You're the CO, you're admin, and you're DFAS. Like, you have to come up with your own paycheck. So it's like huge responsibility. And I'll also share, it's like such a stressful time going through that. And I think like 4 or 5 months after I was transitioning out, I had to deal with a family tragedy. My father, unfortunately, lost his home to a fire. And my focus on building business and investing in myself immediately had to shift. And that was a point where I was looking for some help, and I was trying to reach out to see, like, okay, how can I take care of myself again? Because I've hit a new low. Like, this is way too much stress for one person to bear. And I started feeling that physically. Like, there's knots in my neck, wasn't sleeping, drinking, doing all the things that seemed like a good idea at the time to ease the pain, but ultimately is just accumulating and making it way more difficult for you to make progress. And in an act of desperation, and in a moment where I'm like, I need to do something to take care of my mind and my body, I saw this coaching program, and it's an ICF dual certification for health and life coaching. And I thought, well, okay, I can justify this expense. It's like $5,000 or something like that, because it would be good for my interview practice, and I can actually help my clients and get to the bottom of their communication and see what their barriers are. And that'll help business. But it was, it was really for me. And it's like, I got into the program, and I know I'm kind of going on a tangent here, but this is important because I got to a point in the program where I'm like, this isn't for me. I'm rejecting the idea. This was a big mistake. I emailed the administrators of the program. I say, is there any way that I can get a refund? Like, all this pink and purple stuff, all of this, wellness, do good, feel good, all this mindset stuff. Like, this isn't for me.
It's freaking me out, man.
Right.
I want out.
Yes. It was just like pulling these strings of vulnerability that the military and the Marine Corps particularly does a great job at suppressing.
Yep.
And all of those skill sets that I was avoiding addressing were being put right up front. And that was painful. So I'm like, this isn't for me. I was finding reasons like, oh, these are mostly women in this group, so obviously it's not made for me. It's only because they had this policy in place that they said, well, you're too far through the program now. You either have to continue on through this and get your certification, or you forfeit your investment. You can drop out. So it's like, it took that ultimatum for me to finish. There's 4 pillars, and I was on the second pillar. And once I got to the end of the third pillar, I started to realize the reaction that I had when I tried to get my money back. And it was because I lacked the introspective skills to question my impulse reactions to things like that. So I had to go through the program and feel the suck. That was another breakthrough. I had to just feel that pain of, it really hurts to talk about this stuff, and it's the best thing for me.
Wow.
So having to go through that, getting the certification, it took me, I think, 8 months instead of the 6, just because I was just dreading it because of the mental drudgery and pain that it took to go through. But on the other side of that, one of the best things that I have ever done, I don't have an independent coaching practice, but I still do implement that in my business. But that was a really important part of my transition was that coaching part, because it forced me to have conversations that I didn't want to have with myself. That's probably the biggest takeaway I can give to anyone listening is, maybe rather than investing in getting yourself certified, just reach out, get a coach, get a therapist, find a mentor, because those same depths and those same quality conversations will usually come out.
That's remarkable. I appreciate you being so honest and vulnerable. And I bet a few other people tried that, which is why they had that policy.
Yes, I know. It's like they knew I was coming.
Yeah. You're not the only one that had a bit of a breakdown. You and I share something in common. I sat on the couch thinking about this podcast so long, almost a year. And I was behind on my goals and I was kicking myself and I was recording here and there, calling friends. I have this idea. I'm trying to, I threw spaghetti to the wall. And it's hard for me to this day to listen or watch those tapes or those, because I've learned so much. I wouldn't have learned the same thing sitting on the couch.
That's right.
I had to do it. And so when even today I had this conversation with somebody, allow yourself to really fail and fail through. What is that saying? Fail fast.
Fail forward.
Fail
too.
fast, fail forward.
Yeah.
And, I can now sort of look at those things. Although for those of you who cannot see Jesse's background, his lighting, he's definitely watched a few YouTube channel stuff on how to do this. It's so funny because you were talking about how you've educated yourself, how to be a photographer, how to record people. Your backdrop and your lighting, it's beautiful. I'm sitting here looking at you. I'm almost not paying attention because what he's got going on. Jesse, you've been such a pleasure. Your story will resonate, if not for someone now, for them in the future. Are you open to mentoring? Are you open to talking to veterans, people who maybe are thinking about starting a business and want some of your advice? How would they reach out to you?
Absolutely. Thank you for facilitating the sharing of the story. I'm always open to speak to veterans. I do a lot of work with veteran service organizations. I have an entire separate business that does career development conventions, coaching, headshots, video interviews. And if it's just for a conversation, and anyone's invited to reach out to me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find me pretty easily on there, just JESSESIEFF. And it'll be the guy that says he's a video strategist and a media coach. So just feel free to connect and shoot me a message anytime.
Well, hey, man, you are awesome. And I, as always, when somebody's sitting in the 1 to 4 year segment, I want to know how your career progresses. So I'd love to invite you back as this grows legs and we kind of track people. My dream is to bring someone back in a few years and see where they've been and kind of compare and contrast, because as we're all told, and I'm learning, is transition isn't just when you're getting out of the military, it's constant. If you've spent any amount of time in the military, it has made an impact on you. And, the civilian world is different, even if you've been in it before. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts as your last alibi as we close out this segment.
Yeah, 100%. The Marine Corps has this phrase, adapt and overcome. And I think if there's one thing that you can take away from military service is that is a constant state. Change is the normal, and being willing to go with the flow, but also advocate for yourself is a balance worth finding. And every day is different. So being adaptable, being open, having an open mind, and again, prioritizing self-care above all things, making sure that you are taking care of yourself relentlessly. And it's not a selfish act to do that. It is not selfish to invest in self-care. And in fact, it's selfish not to, because of what example you might be setting for other people. So I definitely encourage people to aggressively take care of themselves, figure out what it is that they need, what dynamic of wellness that they need to be nourished, and show strength and vulnerability as much as you can, because I think that's what we need a lot more of.
What a beautiful way to end the segment. Thank you so much. That was Jesse Sieff, SIEFF. You can find him on LinkedIn, learn about him, do connect out with him, and everybody that we hear on these podcasts. Everyone, not one person has said, I'm not interested in talking to anybody. They wouldn't have showed up to tell their story if they weren't interested in connecting. So again, thank you. My name is Cheryl Cross. This is the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. We're going to close out this segment, and we'll be back with the 5+ year veteran right after this brief break. As we head into our last episode, we talk to our experts. Now, experts in terms of being out of the military, not experts in terms of giving back to the community. But I think this woman is a blend of both. So I'm going to call her an expert who's been out 5 or plus more years. She left the Army as a major. Her name is Annette Wittenberger, and she is a huge mental health advocate. She is also an author, and I'm very pleased to have you as our guest. Aloha from Hawaii, Annette. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
I really appreciate all the things you're contributing to on LinkedIn. And what really caught my eye is not only your incredible background, but what you're doing in the space of advocacy, mental health awareness. You started a blog pretty quickly after you left the military because people weren't talking about it. So why don't you go ahead and launch into that and what took you in that direction?
Oh, you're right. So basically raised in the military for 17 years. So I transitioned into somebody that I wasn't familiar with. And then afterwards, I didn't know who I was anymore. And I felt lost. I felt like a failure. I I had so many mixed emotions. So I turned to social media because at that time, or even now, we sometimes gravitate towards that so that we can kind of be heard and then get thoughts from other people, maybe to help us feel better or whatever the case is. When I turned to Facebook at that time, it was not received well. And so I thought, well, I need to figure it out. I need to figure out another way to have this conversation. And I literally said, let's just go big or go home. And I had a website created. And I I just felt like I needed to create a space for myself, but maybe for other people as well, to just share about how much it sucks when you get out because you don't remember who you are anymore.
Did it start as a blog and then it moved into what?
It did. So it started out as a blog. I started sharing my own personal stories, but then the more people that it reached, the more they reached out to me and asked me, can I contribute to your blog? Because I have a story to tell as well. And I just, I welcomed anybody who had something they wanted to share to help other people. And that's how it started. And since then, I just had people who wanted to share resources. I started a podcast and put it on there. I use it as just this platform to create all kinds of safe spaces for us to share our voice.
And was that healing for you?
It was healing, and it was heartbreaking as well because there's so many people out there that they're not ready to share, or they don't feel like they have enough to share. That I don't have a story. I don't know what I would talk about. But then when I hear them express their feelings, I remind them that you do, and then I just invite them to the platform and then we go from there.
So it's a wild ride called Life
Yes,
is the name of the blog. Did you keep that? Is it still continuing on?
it is. I kept it.
Yeah. And how are you contributing to it, and how might someone tune into it and interact with you?
It's been a while since I've contributed to it because I started to focus on other things. I ended up going to music school and using that as a part of my self-healing journey. It's still there. I still want to revert back to it. I've actually had it redesigned to make it more visible and to provide more. So it's still there, but like I said, I started with music and I'm trying to redesign the whole website thing.
So you're in the process of redoing it, but you are also an author I see in the back there, and it is called The Wall Between Two Lives. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was a scary venture. I didn't know if I wanted to tell about my story. I decided, you know what, let me share some raw footage, so to speak, of why I am the way I am and how I turned out to be the person that I am today. So it starts with my childhood trauma into military sexual trauma, and then military life, being dual military, raising kids. But the purpose of it was to provide purpose. I wanted people to know that you could go through a shitstorm in your life, but you could come out of that by not writing a book, so to speak, but by using your voice. You can use your voice in so many different ways. How can I provide that hope and purpose for other people by sharing my own story?
The term MSA, military sexual assault, is just now being talked about in the broader vernacular. Back when you got out 7 years ago, I believe it wasn't even an acronym. What was the climate back then, and how has that changed?
So with me, it happened in 1998. And because of his position in the military, it was like I was too scared to escalate the situation. I talked about it, but it wasn't something that was like, oh, this is serious. Let's bring this to the higher levels attention. Let's do this. It was like I just had to kind of brush it off, and I just lived with it. I just learned to push it aside and drive on because I didn't want to be seen as weak. I knew I was going to be commissioned in the military. I knew that I still wanted to do it. I just had to figure out another way. And I just learned how to suppress things throughout the rest of my career from that.
When you left the military, you were able to unpack it a bit. What was the climate back then, 7 years ago?
It was still not a place I felt safe to have that conversation because I felt like I needed to protect my family. So I just left it alone. I just went into this quiet place and I didn't know how to have that conversation. I was still a little bit leery of starting the website and starting the blog. So I felt like I was holding back a little bit as well because my husband's still active duty, and I didn't want to be that person that brought up these issues. And
Right.
it's a terrible feeling because I'm in the veteran space and I am, in the military spouse space. So how do I talk about things that aren't talked about without being judged or looked at? Like, you're supposed to be the one that supports your spouse. You're supposed to be the one, that does this and does that. And I'm tired of that. And so I guess I just feel like I need to be the one to spark the conversation and not care anymore.
Well, you certainly are breaking some barriers. So thank you so much for your advocacy. And I know just from watching you on LinkedIn that you help a lot of folks. You're very active. That's how I found you. I was talking to somebody about Congressional Oversight Committee looking at another branch of the military and hopefully uncovering some things that help them move forward. So thank you so much. So what is the future for you? Are you going to continue down the advocacy path? Are you expanding on it? You mentioned something about music. You took music as a healing therapy. What was it and what do you play?
I did. I decided to go to music school. The veteran space offers, you can get like a scholarship to go to school. And so I applied for it. I got accepted and I decided music has always been a part of my life since I was like 16. So when I got accepted, I figured, let me figure out how to use music as a form of healing because we all like some kind of music. It doesn't matter what it is. Through music school, I had to create a project and it was like 50% of a song. And so my daughter was going through a very bad breakup at that time and I asked her to be a part of it. And so she wrote the song and she sang it and I produced it. And so from that, I have 2 songs on Spotify. Well, it's on all the platforms. We use that. We use her heartbreak as a form of healing for her to sing it and write about it. And yeah, it's out there.
You and Taylor Swift. All right. So
Right.
what's the name of the song? Share.
So the first song is called Tomorrow. The second song is called Cold Thoughts. And they are both part of are about her breakup. And she's in a much better place now. But yes, it was definitely something that we worked on together, but using words to heal and then putting it out there to the world.
Yes, and music too.
Yeah.
And even listening to yourself in the headphones or talking in a microphone, some of the vocal exercises I get to do are singing. Don't sing, I'm not a singer, but it helps me warm up my voice.
Mhm.
And it's just a lot of fun to sit in my little, box, my little sound box that I've created for my podcast and just yell well, I'm not singing, I'm more like yelling, but yelling to music that hopefully nobody else can hear. It feels good. It really
Yeah, it
does. And
does.
I started doing that during the pandemic. So I feel you. All right.
Yeah.
Well, you've got one book out, The Wall Between Two Lives. What is that about and how might people find it?
So you can find it anywhere, especially Amazon. I it's a memoir about my life from childhood until 2021 with my life and how I started talking about everything and how military life is not as glamorous as everybody thinks it is. There are some hardships that I went through being dual military and raising children, and I talked about it. I just wanted to be real and just show people that yes, it was difficult, but on the other side of it, I'm stronger. I'm a totally different person than when I was, you know, um, when I experienced the childhood sexual trauma at 10. It opened up a lot of wounds, but I needed it for myself to get through it and to talk about it. And I wanted people to know that it does, no matter what you go through, we just try to find your purpose in life, even when you are no longer working in the corporate world or in the military. There's still hope on the other side, no matter what we go through. So I just felt like it was important to talk about that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, career-wise, when you left the military, what was sort of your employment situation? I know that you were on the chemical officer side as a major, and that's a very specialized field. So, where did you go after you left the military, job-wise?
I became an entrepreneur. I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And so I just tested out a bunch of things and figured out what my space was going to be in the world, what my purpose was going to be. And mental health advocacy it just felt like it needed to happen for me. And so that's what I chose to do. I'm not making six figures. I'm not, it wasn't really about the money. It was about helping myself and helping others through, similar situations that we had gone through in life.
So, I know a lot of folks are going to resonate with what you're saying and may want to reach out to you. What is the best way? Is it LinkedIn?
Yes, LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, under a wild ride called life. But on LinkedIn, Annette Wittenberger.
Okay. And spell that for the folks that are just listening.
First name Annette, Annette. Last name Wittenberger, Wittenberger.
Your story is timeless and very, very impactful. So I appreciate you sharing it. Any last alibis before we say goodbye?
Just remember who you are. No matter what you're going through, you still have to remember who you are as a person and where you came from.
Good advice. Thank you so much. All right, I'm Cheryl Cross. You're listening to the Military to Civilian Career Transition Power Hour. Our hour and some minutes, probably about 30 plus, is done. But I want to say thank you so much for hanging out with us this long. We'll be right back after a short break.